I never expected a casual morning jog to completely upend my life, but that's exactly what happened on that crisp October morning in Patterson Park. One minute I was lost in thought about my upcoming manuscript deadline, and the next, I was sprawled on the ground with hot coffee soaking through my running jacket. My name is Marin, and until that morning, I thought I had my life perfectly mapped out. Career-focused editor by day, occasional marathon runner by dawn, and proudly independent woman all hours in between. But life has a way of laughing at our carefully laid plans. Jesus, I'm so sorry. A deep voice cut through my days. Are you okay? Let me help you up. Strong hands gripped my arms, pulling me to my feet before I could protest. I found myself staring into the most striking green eyes I'd ever seen, belonging to a tall man in a tailored suit who looked equally mortified and concerned. I'm fine, I said, though my elbow stung where I'd landed on it. Maybe watch where you're going next time? He raised an eyebrow. Me? You were the one running with your eyes closed. I wasn't. I started to argue, then remembered I actually had been pretty zoned out. Okay, fair point. I'm Bryce, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. Let me at least pay for your dry cleaning. And maybe buy you a replacement coffee. I should have said no. Something about his confident smile and the way he seemed so sure I'd say yes made me want to prove him wrong. But there was also something magnetic about him, something that made me hesitate just long enough to be polite. I really need to get going, I said, taking his card anyway. I have a meeting in. I checked my phone and groaned. 30 minutes ago. Then definitely let me make it up to you another time. He pulled out a pen and wrote something on the back of the card. That's my personal number. Use it. As I hurried home to change, I told myself I wouldn't call him. I had enough on my plate with the publishing house's fall lineup and my mother's constant hints about settling down. The last thing I needed was a distraction, especially one that came in the form of an admittedly handsome but probably arrogant businessman. But when I finally made it to my office, something fell out of my jacket pocket. It wasn't Bryce's business card. That was safely tucked in my wallet. It was an old, yellowed envelope, the kind you might find in your grandmother's attic. The paper was thick and expensive feeling, with a single name written in elegant script, Lorraine. I turned it over in my hands, wondering how it got there. Had it fallen out of Bryce's pocket during our collision? Had someone slipped it into my jacket at the park? The seal was broken, and before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled out the letter inside. My hands started shaking as I read the first line. My dearest Lorraine, by the time you read this, the truth about what happened that night at the Calloway house will have come to light. Calloway. My last name. This couldn't be a coincidence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow? Bryce. I stared at the message, then back at the letter, my mind racing. Something about this felt too perfect, too orchestrated. But if this letter somehow connected my family to Bryce's, I needed to know how. I typed back a quick response, tomorrow at 9. You pick the place. Sometimes the best way to uncover the truth is to walk straight into the trap, eyes wide open. I just hoped I wouldn't regret it. 3 months into dating Bryce, I found myself standing in front of his parents' sprawling Victorian home, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. The mysterious letter about Lorraine was still hidden in my desk drawer at home, untouched since that first day. I hadn't found the right moment to bring it up with Bryce, and now, facing the prospect of meeting his mother, I wondered if I ever would. They're going to love you, Bryce said, squeezing my hand. Just be yourself. I wanted to ask which version of myself he meant, independent career woman I actually was, or the traditional future daughter-in-law I suspected his family wanted. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Lorraine Harlow stood there in a perfectly pressed floral dress, her silver hair styled immaculately. Bryce, darling. She embraced him, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And you must be Marin. Come in, come in. The house was like stepping into a museum of family history. Photos lined every wall, telling the story of generations of Harlows. As Lorraine led us through the foyer, something caught my eye, an old black and white photograph partially hidden behind newer frames. That's my father, Lorraine said, noticing my interest. Such a handsome man, wasn't he? Taken at the country club in '62, I believe. I stepped closer, my heart racing. The man in the photo wasn't alone. He was shaking hands with someone who looked eerily familiar. Someone who shared my grandfather's distinctive crooked smile. "Who's the other man?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lorraine's expression flickered for just a moment. "Oh, just some business associate." Those were different times. She quickly steered us toward the dining room. Dinner's getting cold. Over perfectly plated pot roast, Lorraine dominated the conversation with questions that felt more like an interrogation. "And what are your thoughts on family, dear? Surely you're not planning to work full-time once you have children." "Mother," Bryce warned, but she waved him off. "It's a perfectly reasonable question. A mother's place is with her children. Wouldn't you agree?" I set down my fork carefully. "Actually, I believe every family needs to find what works best for them." My mother managed both a career and family beautifully. "How modern." Lorraine's smile tightened. "Bryce, remember how lovely it was having me home every day after school? Those are memories money can't buy." I watched Bryce nod automatically, and something inside me cracked. This wasn't just about different values. There was something calculated in Lorraine's attempts to shape the narrative of my future. After dinner, while Bryce helped his father with dishes, Lorraine cornered me in the living room. "You know, dear, Bryce has always been very traditional. He'll expect a proper family life. Have you discussed this with him, or are you just assuming?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "A mother knows her son, and I know what's best for this family." Something in her tone made me think of the letter. The way she dismissed the photo. The careful control she maintained over every aspect of this house, this family, this narrative. "Like you knew what was best the night at the Calloway house?" I said quietly. Lorraine went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" "Because I think you do, Lorraine. And I think there's a lot more to this family's history than you're letting on." Before she could respond, Bryce returned. "Everything okay in here?" "Perfect, darling," Lorraine said smoothly. "I was just telling Marin about our summer house. You should take her there sometime." As we left that night, Bryce seemed oblivious to the tension. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something much bigger than a simple family dinner. In my purse, I'd slipped the old photograph I'd managed to take from the wall when no one was looking. Something told me I was going to need every piece of evidence I could get. Because Lorraine Harlow wasn't just a controlling mother, she was protecting a secret. And somehow, my family was tied to it all. I found the realtor's business card while doing laundry. It fell from Bryce's jacket pocket, along with a folded listing for a house 3 blocks from his parents. My hands trembled as I read the agent's notes. "Perfect starter home for your growing family, as discussed." 6 months into our relationship, and he was house hunting. Without telling me. 3 blocks from Lorraine. I called my best friend Tess immediately. "Can you meet me at Carlo's?" 20 minutes later, I was sliding into our usual booth, the stolen photograph and mysterious letter spread out between us. Tess whistled low. "So your boyfriend's secretly house hunting, his mom's giving off serious villain vibes. And there's some decades-old family drama involving your grandfather? Girl, you're living in a soap opera." "It gets worse," I said, pulling out my phone. Look what I found when I searched my grandfather's name with Lorraine's father. The newspaper article from 1962 was brief but telling. "Local business partnership dissolves amid fraud allegations." Both men's names were listed, along with mentions of missing funds and threatened lawsuits. "Have you talked to your mom about any of this?" I shook my head. "I don't want to worry her. Besides, she was just a kid when all this happened." "Speak of the devil," Tess muttered, looking past me. I turned to see Bryce walking into the cafe. He spotted us and headed over, his usual confident smile in place. "Thought I might find you here. We need to talk about something exciting." My stomach clenched. "Like the house you've been looking at?" His smile faltered. "How did you?" "Found the realtor's card." "Were you planning to tell me before or after you signed the papers?" "I wanted it to be a surprise." He slid into the booth beside me, either not noticing or ignoring Tessa's glare. "Mom found the listing, actually. She thinks it would be perfect for us." Of course she did. I pushed the realtor's card across the table. "Did she also think it would be perfect not to discuss this with me first?" "Come on, Marin. You know we're heading in that direction anyway. I thought you'd be happy." "Happy about being manipulated into living 3 blocks from your mother?" About having my future planned without my input. You're overreacting. His voice took on that patronizing tone I'd started to recognize, the same one Lorraine used. This is a natural progression. We're not getting any younger, and Mom's right about. Your mom seems right about a lot of things. I cut in. Tell me, does she know anything about what happened between our grandfathers? The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? I slid the old photograph across the table. This was taken the same year their partnership fell apart. The same year your grandfather allegedly stole money from mine. Where did you get that? His voice was sharp now, all pretense of charm gone. Did you take this from my parents' house? Does it matter? What matters is what really happened that night at the Calloway house, the night mentioned in this letter addressed to your mother. Bryce stood abruptly. You need to drop this, Marin. Some things are better left in the past. Like my career? My independence? Are those better left in the past too? That's not fair. I'm trying to build a future for us. No, I said quietly. You and your mother are trying to build the future you want, regardless of what I want. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I love you, Marin, but you need to decide what's more important. This paranoid investigation into ancient history, or our future together. As he walked away, Tess reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You okay? I stared at the photograph, at those two men whose past somehow still controlled our present. No, I said. But I will be. Because now I know I'm right, there's something they're hiding. And I'm going to find out what it is. The local library's microfilm archive smelled like dust and secrets. I'd been spending my lunch breaks here for a week, searching through old newspapers for any mention of my grandfather or the Harlows. Bryce's calls had become less frequent, and Lorraine had started dropping by my office with thinly veiled suggestions about cutting back my hours. Still digging through ancient history? I jumped at Tessa's voice. She set a coffee on the desk beside me and peered at the screen. Find anything good? Maybe. I pointed to a society page from 1962. Look at this photo caption. Edward Calloway and James Harlow celebrate merger at the Calloway estate. The same night mentioned in that letter to Lorraine. The night everything fell apart, Tess mused. Have you asked your mom about it yet? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Bryce. Hey, can we talk? Mom's hosting dinner tonight and I can't. The lie came easily now. Deadline at work. A pause. You've had a lot of those lately. Publishing doesn't stop for dinner parties. After hanging up, I noticed a new email from an anonymous address. My hands shook as I opened it. Your grandfather wasn't the victim. Ask about the fire. What fire? Tess asked, reading over my shoulder. I was already pulling up newspaper archives from the weeks following the merger celebration. There it was, buried on page 6, suspicious fire at Harlow Manufacturing. Insurance claims denied. My phone rang again. This time my mother's name flashed on the screen. Mom. Honey, why is Lorraine Harlow asking me about your grandfather's business dealings? My stomach dropped. She called you. She seemed very interested in that old factory fire. I told her that's all in the past, but she was quite insistent. The pieces started clicking together. The letter. The fire. The mysterious email. Mom, what really happened that night at our house? A long silence followed. Come over for dinner. There are things you should know. 2 hours later, I sat in my childhood kitchen, watching my mother pull out a dusty box from the top shelf of her closet. She placed an old leather journal on the table between us. Your grandfather's, she said quietly. I've never shown this to anyone. He wrote everything down, including what really happened the night of the merger. As I read, my coffee grew cold. The story unfolding in my grandfather's careful handwriting was nothing like what the newspapers reported. The merger, the missing money, the fire. It had all been orchestrated by Lorraine's father to destroy my grandfather's reputation and take control of both companies. But why didn't Grandpa fight back? Clear his name. Mom's eyes were sad. Because James Harlow threatened to expose something else, something that would have destroyed our entire family. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous email. Check the basement of the old factory. Proof still exists. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. Marin, wait. Mom grabbed my arm. Be careful. The Harlows protect their secrets fiercely. Why do you think Lorraine's so desperate to keep you close? To keep you quiet. Everything clicked into place. Lorraine's controlling behavior, Bryce's sudden push for marriage, the house 3 blocks away. They weren't trying to welcome me into their family. They were trying to contain me. As I drove home, my phone lit up with texts from Bryce. "Where are you? Mom's worried. We need to talk about our future." I turned my phone off and pulled into my parking spot, my mind racing with possibilities. The old factory was scheduled for demolition next month. Whatever proof existed wouldn't last long. A familiar car was parked in front of my building. Through the window, I could see Lorraine sitting in my living room, probably let in by my too helpful neighbor, waiting to have another chat about family values and tradition. I drove past without stopping. Some conversations would have to wait. I had a factory to visit, and time was running out. The abandoned factory loomed against the twilight sky, a hollow shell of rust and broken windows. I clutched my grandfather's journal in one hand and my phone's flashlight in the other, trying to ignore the no trespassing signs as I searched for a way in. A text from Bryce lit up my screen. "Mom says you're making wild accusations. Come home. We can work this out." Home. As if his vision of our future could ever feel like home now. The basement entrance was partially hidden behind overgrown weeds. As I pulled at the rusted door, headlights swept across the building. I ducked behind a concrete pillar, heart pounding, as a familiar black SUV pulled up. Bryce stepped out, phone to his ear. "I'm here, Mom." No sign of her yet. I pressed deeper into the shadows, watching him pace. Of course I still want to marry her. But she's becoming obsessed with this conspiracy theory about Dad's company. The word conspiracy made my blood boil. I had proof in my grandfather's journal, in the anonymous emails, in the growing pile of evidence that pointed to decades of calculated destruction by the Harlow family. "Found what you're looking for?" I spun around. Lorraine stood there, elegant even in the dim light, holding what looked like an old leather briefcase. "How did you? I've known you'd come here eventually." She gestured to the briefcase. "Looking for this, perhaps? The real merger documents? The proof of what really happened that night. You knew. All this time, you knew what your father did to my grandfather. I knew he did what was necessary to protect our family's legacy." She stepped closer. "Just like I'm doing now. By manipulating Bryce? By trying to control my life. By offering you a choice." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Join our family properly. Give up this obsession with the past. Be the wife Bryce needs, and these documents disappear forever. Continue this investigation, and I'll make sure history repeats itself. Your career, your reputation. Everything can burn just as easily as this factory did." Footsteps crunched on gravel. Bryce appeared around the corner, freezing when he saw us. "Perfect timing, darling," Lorraine said. "Tell Marin what you found at work today." Bryce wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your publishing house is considering a merger with a company owned by our family's investment group." The pieces clicked into place. My recent manuscript rejections, the sudden scrutiny from upper management, Lorraine's smug visits to my office. "You're trying to destroy my career." My voice shook. "Just like your father destroyed my grandfather's." "I'm trying to show you what really matters," Bryce said, finally looking at me. "Family. Tradition. Security. We can have it all, if you just let go of the past." "Let go." I pulled out my phone, displaying the anonymous email. "Like your father let go when he set the fire? When he framed my grandfather for fraud?" "Marin, please." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I love you. We can start fresh, forget all this." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You want me to forget, to conform, to become another carefully controlled piece in your family's perfect picture. I want you to be happy." "No." I looked at Lorraine, still clutching her briefcase of secrets. "You want me to be quiet." The choice crystallized in that moment, the comfortable cage they offered, or the uncertain path of truth and independence. I thought of my grandfather, forced to choose between his reputation and some darker secret. Of my mother, carrying the weight of that choice all these years. "Keep your documents," I told Lorraine. "Keep your merger, your house 3 blocks away, your perfectly planned future." "I choose the truth." "You're making a mistake," Lorraine called as I walked away. Maybe I was. But it was my mistake to make. Behind me, I heard Bryce's footsteps, his voice urgent. Marin, wait. I didn't turn around. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. The morning after walking away from Bryce and Lorraine, I arrived at work to find my office door locked and my personal items in a cardboard box. My boss wouldn't meet my eyes as she handed me my termination papers. Restructuring, she said quietly. Nothing personal. Except it was personal. Lorraine's warning echoed in my head. Everything can burn. I carried my box to my car, passing whispers and sympathetic glances. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. The bank called. Something about grandfather's house. The house I'd inherited. The last piece of my grandfather's legacy. 20 minutes later, I sat in a sterile bank office, staring at foreclosure documents. The mortgage payments I'd always made on time had supposedly been missing for months. The bank's records showed bounced checks and failed transfers, all fabricated, all perfectly documented. There must be some mistake, I said, but the bank manager's expression told me there wasn't. My phone kept lighting up with messages from Bryce. This isn't what I wanted. Let me help fix this. Just talk to my mother. I turned it off. Tess found me at the coffee shop where this had all started, staring into a cold cup of coffee. Jesus, Marin. You look like hell. They're taking everything, I said. My job, the house, my reputation. The publishing industry's small. Lorraine's making sure I'll never work in it again. Fight back. You have proof, right? Your grandfather's journal. The factory documents. The journal's gone. My voice cracked. Someone broke into my apartment last night. They only took that and my laptop with all my research. Tess slid into the booth across from me. What about the anonymous emails? The person who's been helping you? I pulled out my phone and showed her the final message I'd received that morning. I'm sorry. They found me. You're on your own now. We can still expose them, Tess insisted. I have contacts at the newspaper. And say what? That my boyfriend's mother is destroying my life because of a 60-year-old business feud? That she's somehow orchestrating all this from her perfect suburban house while hosting garden parties? I laughed bitterly. I sound crazy. That's exactly what they want. The coffee shop door chimed. Lorraine walked in, immaculate as always, and headed straight for our table. May I join you? She didn't wait for an answer before sliding in next to Tess, who looked ready to throw her coffee in Lorraine's face. I'll give you two a moment, Tess said, standing. She squeezed my shoulder as she left, a small gesture of support that nearly broke me. You've made your point, I said quietly. Have I? Lorraine's perfectly manicured nails tapped the table. Because I think you're still missing the bigger picture. This isn't just about you and Bryce, or even about our family's past. This is about legacy, about protecting what matters. By destroying innocent people? By doing whatever it takes. She pulled out an envelope, the same one I'd found that first day. You never asked what secret your grandfather was protecting. What was so terrible that he'd rather lose everything than have it exposed? My hands shook as I reached for the envelope. The choice is still yours, Lorraine said, standing. Come to dinner tonight. Bring Bryce's ring, yes, the one he's been carrying for months. We can announce your engagement, and all of this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the wreckage of my life. Goes away. And if I don't, then I finish what my father started. And this time, there won't be anything left of the Calloway name to salvage. She left me there, holding an envelope that could destroy what little I had left. Through the window, I watched her slide into her car where Bryce waited, his face a mask of concern and confusion. I thought of my grandfather, faced with an impossible choice 60 years ago. Of my mother, carrying secrets she still wouldn't fully share. Of everything I'd lost trying to uncover the truth. Maybe some secrets were meant to stay buried. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and finally understood why my grandfather had chosen silence. The dinner table at the Harlow house felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy. Lorraine at the head, Bryce to her right, his father silent at the other end, and me, the reluctant player in their family drama. The engagement ring sat heavy in my pocket, not yet on my finger where they all expected it to be. But I had something else in my other pocket. Something that changed everything. Shall we make the announcement? Lorraine raised her wine glass, triumph glinting in her eyes. I pulled out the envelope she'd given me earlier, but not the one she expected. This one was older, yellowed with age, rescued from a safety deposit box my mother had kept secret for decades. Actually, I'd like to read something first. My voice was steadier than I felt. A letter from my grandfather to yours, Lorraine. The one you didn't know existed. The color drained from her face. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I unfolded the paper. Dear James, by now you've destroyed my company, stolen my patents, and framed me for the fire. But we both know the real reason why. It wasn't about business at all, was it? Bryce's father stood abruptly. Mare, stop. It was about your wife, I continued. About how she chose me first, how she was going to leave you before you threatened to destroy everything I'd built. Lorraine's wine glass shattered in her grip. Red spread across the white tablecloth like blood. You're lying, Bryce said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Your grandmother left these letters, Bryce, along with proof of what really happened. Your grandfather didn't just steal my grandfather's company. He buried the truth about his marriage, about who he really was. Mother. Bryce turned to Lorraine, who sat rigid in her chair. What is she talking about? I protected this family, Lorraine whispered. Everything I did, everything my father did, was to keep our name clean, our legacy intact. By destroying mine, I pulled out my phone, showing the email I'd received that morning from Bryce's father's private account. You were my anonymous source. You've been helping me all along, haven't you, Mr. Harlow? Trying to right your father's wrongs. The silence that followed was deafening. Bryce's father wouldn't meet his wife's accusing stare. Richard. Lorraine's voice cracked. How could you? Because I'm tired, he said quietly. Tired of the lies, of watching history repeat itself, of seeing you try to control our son's life the same way your father controlled yours. Bryce stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. All this time, the merger, the house, the pressure to propose, it was about keeping her quiet, about hiding some ancient scandal. It was about family, Lorraine insisted, about protecting what matters. No. I placed the engagement ring on the table. It was about control, about power, about making sure no one ever discovered that the great James Harlow built his empire on blackmail and lies. Get out, Lorraine hissed. Get out of my house. Gladly. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and those documents you took from my apartment? Copies. The originals are with my lawyer, along with a very interesting story about corporate fraud, arson, and decades of manipulation. Your choice what happens next. Marin, wait. Bryce caught my arm. We can still. No, we can't. I gently pulled away. You have to decide who you want to be, Bryce. But you'll have to do it without me. As I walked out, I heard the beginning of what would surely be hours of painful truths. Lorraine's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and with it, the power she'd held over both our families for so long. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Are you okay? I looked back at the house, where raised voices had already started to break the evening quiet. Sometimes justice doesn't look like we expect. Sometimes it's not about winning, but about finally being free to walk away. Yes, I replied. I'm coming home. 6 months after that final dinner at the Harlow house, I stood in my grandfather's study, now restored to its former glory. The foreclosure had been reversed. My reputation in publishing quietly rehabilitated, all part of the legal settlement that the Harlows had desperately wanted to keep private. Tess helped me unpack the last box of my grandfather's papers, rescued from years of storage. Look what I found, she said, holding up a faded photograph. My grandfather and James Harlow, young and smiling, standing in front of their first factory, before greed and secrets tore everything apart. My phone buzzed, a text from Bryce. Mom's starting therapy. Dad moved out. Can we talk? I left it unanswered, like all his messages since that night. Some conversations were better left in the past. Your mother's here, Tess called from downstairs. I found Mom in the kitchen, holding a letter I'd never seen before. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to me. I found this while cleaning out the attic, she said. It's from your grandfather. He wrote it the night before he died, but never sent it. The paper was thick, expensive, the same type as the letter that had started this whole journey. My grandfather's handwriting was shaky but clear. My dearest granddaughter, by the time you read this, you'll have uncovered the truth about our family's past. But there's something you should know, something I never told anyone. The night of the fire, James Harlow came to me with a choice. He would spare our family's reputation if I gave him the company. What he didn't know was that I had already discovered his own secret, proof that could have destroyed him instead. But revenge is a poison that corrupts both families. I chose silence not from weakness, but from hope that someday, someone would be strong enough to break this cycle of destruction. You were stronger than I ever was. You chose truth over comfort, justice over revenge. I'm sorry for the burden our past placed on your future, but proud of how you carried it. With love. Grandfather. The doorbell rang, startling us. Through the frosted glass, I recognized Lorraine's silhouette. You don't have to answer it, Mom said quietly. But I did. Lorraine stood there, looking smaller somehow, more human without her usual armor of perfection. I found this in my father's papers, she said, holding out a small package. I thought you should have it. Inside was a silver pocket watch, engraved with my grandfather's initials. Your father took this the night of the fire? Lorraine nodded. As a trophy, I suppose. I never understood why he kept it. She hesitated. Bryce is starting his own business. Away from the family company. He's different now. Better, maybe. I'm glad, I said and meant it. After she left, I sat in my grandfather's chair, turning the pocket watch over in my hands. The face was cracked, frozen at 9:47, the moment everything changed for both our families. You okay? Tess asked, perching on the desk. Yeah. I placed the watch on the shelf beside the old photograph. You know what's funny? All this started because I was afraid of losing my independence. But fighting to keep it taught me more about family than giving it up ever could. Mom squeezed my shoulder. Your grandfather would be proud. My phone lit up again, an email from a small publishing house offering me a position as senior editor. The owner's name made me smile. Richard Harlow. Bryce's father, starting fresh just like his son. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, but about building something new from the ashes of the past. My grandfather understood that. Now finally, so did I. I looked around the study, at the pieces of both families' histories now sharing space on my shelves. The watch that marked the end of one era. The photograph that captured the beginning. And the letter that reminded me that strength sometimes means knowing when to let go. Come on, I said to Mom and Tess. Let's get coffee. I have some stories to tell you.